Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the March 9, 2021 special meeting of the Glendale City Council. Due to evolving situation with COVID-19 and health recommendations from LA County Health Department, the Glendale City Council meeting will be available to the public electronically. Due to social distancing requirements, the public will not be able to attend the meeting. This meeting can be viewed on local cable, Spectrum and Charter Cable Channel 6 and AT&T Uverse Channel 99. You may also stream online through our website, www.glendaleca.gov, by scrolling all the way to the bottom of the web page and selecting live streaming, which is the third icon from the left. For public comments and questions during the meeting, call 818-937-8100, which is on the screen. Please do not call in advance of the agenda item. With this being said, may I have roll call, please?
Councilmember Brotman.
Here.
Devine.
Here.
Kasakian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Mayor Agajanian.
Present. Thank you, Mr. Jimian. Next item, please.
The agenda for the Tuesday, March 2nd, March 9th, 2021 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on March 2nd, 2021 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Next, please.
Next would be community development regarding economic development update on business recovery strategy grant program. A motion approving staff recommendations to change grant parameters to the CDBG Measure S and PPE grant programs in order to help more small business qualify for resources. B, motion authorizing staff to initiate third round of applications for CDBG Measure S grant as outlined in this report. C, motion approving staff recommendations for reallocating funds as part of the business recovery strategy to better align resources with needs.
Thank you. Mr. Golanian.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor Agajanian, members City Council. This item is brought to you as an update on the business recovery strategy. Thanks to City Council's fortitude and the allocation of over $3 million in Measure S funds, staff has been able to establish 6 different strategies that they will go over and will ask Council's authorization to reallocate some of these fundings and strategies. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tamar Saad for a report and open it up to questions. Thank you.
Okay, Tamar, Ms. Tamar Saad.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Everyone can see the PowerPoint?
Can?
Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. The item before you is a progress update of the implementation of the $4.2 million business recovery strategy, which you adopted in June 2020. In addition to this update, we will also be requesting some allocation changes amongst the programs based on demand, guideline amendments, and introduction of 2 new programs. As mentioned, the strategy was originally adopted on June 16, 2020, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic in an effort to support the local business recovery efforts. On August 2nd, 2020, Council more narrowly defined the programs and shifted some of the funds to better align resources with funding needs. Today, we have additional proposed refinements and reallocations to meet demands. No new appropriations are needed. We are only requesting to shift some of the funds from one program to another. We will dive more deeply into each program, but this chart is an overview of where the money is being moved to and from. We will begin with the program that received the largest allocation of Measure S funding,
Ms.
the
Sad,
Small
Ms.
Business
Sad, I'm
Recovery.
sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Did you,
Yes.
because I know that we allocated 3,650,000. Did you say 4 million? The number, I didn't hear 3.6. I heard
Correct.
you're saying 4 million something. Are you combining
Correct.
the 2 figures? That 500?
I'm combining, I'm sorry.
Please go ahead.
Oh, I'm combining the 3.65 in addition to the 572,000
Okay.
That's from the CDBG fund.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Continue, please.
Thank you. The Small Business Recovery Grants, this was a $2.25 million program which provided $5,000 grants to 450 small businesses. Through 2 rounds of applications, we have approved 220 applicants and dispersed $1.1 million to our Glendale business community. There are currently 96 applications under review, and following their approvals or denials, we will have a maximum of 230 available grants for the 3rd round. That is to say, if all 96 applicants under review were approved, there would be 134 available grants for round 3 if Council approves initiating a 3rd round. Because of the ongoing need of these grants, we are recommending reallocating $75,000 from the Business Association grants and $100,000 from the Support the Arts grant program to the Small Business Recovery Program. This will increase the total allocation for the Small Business Recovery grants to $2.425 million and allow us to assist 35 additional businesses. With each of these updates to Council, we do analyze trends to make recommendations on the guidelines. Of the 73 applicants that were denied in round 2, 32% were because they had already received funding from the City of Glendale in round 1, and 23% were not in the approved zone based on our current guidelines. Our proposed changes to this program are to remove the requirement for these businesses to be in a commercial zone so that home-based businesses may also apply, and requiring those home-based businesses to provide a home occupation permit. We would also like to remove the exclusion for houses of worship. The recipients of these grants do need to demonstrate a hardship of 25% losses in revenue to qualify. The types of businesses that have been awarded funding so far include personal service, food service, general retail, fitness, professional services such as fingerprinting, travel and event management, dental, and education. The low-income business grants.
Question? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask a
Yes.
quick question?
Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Brockman.
if you go back to the last slide, so you said that the businesses have to demonstrate hardship, but we're not, this is self-certification, right? We're not actually, they're not literally demonstrating through any kinds of reporting, are they?
Not reporting, but they do provide us a statement that demonstrates what that hardship is. We're not asking for full financial data, but they do need to demonstrate to the city that they have experienced a hardship and that they're at a loss of 25% in revenue.
Okay, but they're basically, they're making a statement, they're self-certifying, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So I'm sorry I continue. I want to make sure. So the owner of the business is just on a statement or on a piece of paper says that I have 25% loss, and that ends in there, right? No more documents, nothing, right? We are not asking for
I do
documentation.
believe that's correct.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Moving on to our low-income business grants are similar to the Measure S funded small business recovery grants, but they have an additional eligibility requirement as directed by HUD. This includes that the business would have to be a restaurant or deemed non-essential, and they must also not have received federal funding. Council appropriated $572,000 in CDBG funds to provide $114 $5,000 grants to low-income businesses. Currently, 47 applications have been approved and $235,000 has been dispersed to the Glendale business community. There are 63 grants available for round 3 if council approves initiating a third round. As mentioned, there are additional guidelines from HUD which we cannot modify, but we have received approval to recommend to council the removal of the commercially zoned condition, which resulted in 20% of round 2 applicants being denied. As with Measure S grants, we would also recommend that home-based businesses provide a home occupation permit. This is the proposed timeline for a third round of applications. In order to ensure we reach as many businesses as possible, a month-long outreach process, including a webinar explaining each program, is recommended for round 3. This would be similar to round 2's timeline and outreach efforts, and would allow us the opportunity to update and translate all outreach material, disseminate information on websites, direct outreach to our business recovery task force members, local merchant groups, and other community partners, and also allow for general word of mouth. In order to collect as many applications as possible to award the remaining grants, a 2-week application period is recommended for each program. And to minimize confusion between the 2 grant programs and prevent duplicate submissions, applications will not be running concurrently. Moving to our Al Fresco program, this received a $300,000 allocation to support restaurants in the creation of new or expanded outdoor dining. This was achieved on their private property with temporary certificate of occupancy or TCOs, in the public right-of-way with the Al Fresco permits, and in city-created parklets, which utilize curbside parking to create additional space for outdoor service. To date, we have 13 parklets, 7 are in the downtown and 6 are in Montrose, 70 sidewalk dining permits, and 15 TCOs, which, as mentioned, are on private property. In addition to requests from restaurants, the city has also received requests from other business sectors seeking support for outdoor options. While the city is working to accommodate each sector through creative and flexible approaches, these requests and recent public health orders indicating outdoor measures may be here longer than originally anticipated are expected to cause the program to expand and exceed the current funding allocation. It is recommended that this program's allocation be increased from $300,000 to $450,000 by reallocating $150,000 from the Personal Protective Equipment or PPE grant program. This will allow the purchase of additional tables, chairs, umbrellas, planters, K-rails, and the labor associated with the install and beautification of these items. This additional funding can assist 60 additional businesses. The Support the Arts grant program, administered by Library Arts and Culture Department, offers grants to nonprofit Glendale-based arts and culture organizations for working capital. A total of $45,000 has been granted to 6 arts and cultural organizations. A second round of applications closed on February 19th, 2021, and it is anticipated that another $15,000 will be granted for a total expenditure of $60,000 in grant awards. Additional expenses, including staff time, will not exceed $100,000 of the allocated $200,000. Instead of opening this grant for a third round, it is recommended that the remaining $100,000 be reallocated to the Small Business Recovery Grant.
Tamara?
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
I just want to,
Mr.
it's okay to ask questions as we go. I think it's easier that way than.
Yes, go ahead,
waiting for the-
Mr. Rotman.
Yeah, I just want to check on this. It makes sense what you're doing. I just want to make sure that you have run this by the Arts and Culture Commission. They're aware and they're on board with cutting this back from 200 to 100,000.
Yes. Councilmember Botman, Director Gary Schaefer is also on the line, but he has informed me that they have made the Arts and Culture Commission aware of this.
Okay, and they didn't raise any objections. They're comfortable with what we're doing here.
Yes, sir.
Mayor
Go ahead.
Agajanian and Councilmember Rotman, we have advised them, and the fact of the matter is we did the 2 rounds. Economic Development first sent out a survey of interest. We also contacted the county to find out available organizations that they had made grants to round out our list. We did have several, as Tamar has said, we had several organizations apply and actually did receive grant funding, but the matter remains that we, quite frankly, don't have that many arts and culture organizations here in Glendale, and not that many that are eligible. For instance, if an organization has no staff, then it is likely that they're ineligible to receive grant funding. So.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a
Yes,
question?
Ms. Devine.
Thank you. Dr. Schaefer, did you, and I'm sorry, maybe I missed this, did you consult with the Antaeus Theater and the Glendale Arts and the Youth Orchestra if they were in need of any more funding?
We did not check if they were in need of any more funding, but all of those groups you mentioned did receive funding. And I am aware, and I think Phil can let me know, that there may be another grant opportunity available to them outside of city funding.
Is that the Portantino measure?
Yes.
Lance Bain, you on that?
And round four will be exclusive to nonprofit cultural event venues
Right.
and institutions.
Okay, that's the Golden State stimulus package.
Correct.
Okay,
That will run March 16th through March 23rd.
right.
So those
Okay.
funds will be available sooner. In our guidelines, to specifically answer your question, in our guidelines, everybody, and this crosses all the programs, we're entitled to 1 grant. If the council chooses to increase the amount, we would want to take a look at that and then recommend that for others as well.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure that if they are in need, that their funding is there. I don't want to cut them off when they're still, a lot of businesses and the arts, everyone is in dire straits right now. So I just want to make sure that they're covered. And then in the future, you're saying if we decide that the council decides that they are still in need of funding, we can do that.
You certainly can, but again, we have all of our guidelines across the board for grants were 1 grant per institution. If you wanted to increase that number, we could increase that number, or if you wanted to say you can apply for another grant and take that 1 city program requirement out, you certainly can do that as well. If you do, we would just like to be able to analyze so we can come back to you and say, we anticipate this much interest.
Okay. Is that something that we would do now, today?
If you want to double the funding for those, you can tell us and we'll go back. But we are recommending and asking to move this funding to another program, the Small Business Recovery. If you do want to do that, we would hold off on reallocating these funds.
Okay. I don't know if there's any support from my fellow council members or not. I would be okay even with half of the the 100,000 that you're reallocating. Maybe 50,000, leave 50,000 there just in case.
But there
I don't
will
know if
be,
anyone.
but there will be an allocation at a later time. There are other programs. So let's consider that later on the future allocations.
When you say future, you're talking about in like a month, or are you talking about
Yes.
later today?
No, like next month or whenever
Okay,
they bring
there's-
the next one.
Okay, all right, fine.
All right.
As long, if there's no support from my colleagues, that's okay.
All
At least
right.
I know that it's covered by
If
the
I-
golden stimulus package, that's fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
if I might, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Ba-
I would, maybe let's wait to the end of this report and look at the allocations, and then, staff can reach out perhaps, because I think if I remember from the report and our discussion in the briefings, 100,000 in the arts program there's still what, 20,000 unallocated or something? I forget the amount, but you hadn't actually spent the 400,000, right?
No,
Well,
we
that's
would
correct.
anticipate $40,000. There's one or two grants that we see out there. We've currently issued 45,000. We think there's another $15,000 in grants. So that would bring us to 60. If you reallocated, we would have $40,000 remaining.
Okay, so we still have some, Councilmember Devine, we still have some in
Yes,
there if we
yep.
go to 100,000. Perhaps we can keep an eye on it and have staff, let us know if it looks like there's a need.
And I might add that I think there was some money allocated to staff time. So I don't know that it's exactly 40,000, but there is still definitely some funds remaining. Absolutely.
Well, my main concern is that they are funded, that we are not leaving them in the lurch with no help at all. I just want to make sure that they have the help and the funding that they need. So if you think 40,000 is enough to get them by in the next few months, I'll agree to that. I'll go with that.
All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Devine, if I might, I would say that everybody that has asked for the grant has received it. And again, I say this, it's a policy decision by the council. If you want to provide additional funding specifically to the arts, that's your prerogative. We have some money left and I can tell you they will all need more money. So it's really a policy decision on the council's part. Do you want to provide more money for the arts? And that's about all we can give to you.
Well, it sounds like I'm the only one, so we'll just leave it at that.
All right. Let's continue now.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Personal Protective Equipment, or PPE program, is our next item on the list, and it provides $500 reimbursements to businesses that made eligible protective purchases such as plexiglass barriers, masks, and cleaning products. Of the $500,000 that was allocated to this program, $450,000 was to reimburse up to 900 businesses, and the remaining $50,000 was utilized for outreach and distribution of the 20,000 gallons of hand sanitizer received by the City of Glendale as a grant from Cal OES. Only brick and mortar businesses are currently eligible. Staff does recommend removing this clause and also the requirement that they be in a commercial zone. This would allow home-based businesses, which include a variety of tradespeople such as residential and commercial contractors like plumbers, electricians, and handy workers who still require the use of PPE when conducting business to receive their reimbursement. It is further recommended that home-based businesses also be required to provide a home occupation permit. At this time, 91 grants have been approved, with $43,000 being disseminated and additional 98 applications under review. Since initiating this program, this hand sanitizer donation and a better understanding of the average PPE expenses per business has reduced the amount of funding needed for this program. It is recommended that $350,000 be reallocated to other recovery efforts, specifically $150,000 to Al Fresco and $200,000 to the Community Services and Parks Managed program. The Business Association grant was focused on organizations headquartered in Glendale that have access to, represent, or have a membership of a minimum of 10 businesses and or 100 employees to develop programs, provide training to assist businesses in accessing other critical funding sources, and assist in distributing personal protective equipment. A maximum of 10 grants at $15,000 were available on a first-come, first-served basis. To date, 5 associations have applied for and been granted an award totaling $75,000. As there are no additional applications or requests for this grant opportunity, it is recommended that the remaining grant funds of $75,000 be reassigned to the Small Business Recovery Grant. Moving on to the program managed by Community Services and Parks. With the knowledge that 2021 school year would be continuing with distance learning, Community Services and Parks began looking at child care program options that would assist working families in Glendale. For the fall semester, Council approved Education Connection and Maple Stars After School program, which were implemented at 5 locations. These programs were similar to the tech pods offered by GUSD, where a recreation staff member assists groups of 10 to 12 students with their daily remote learning. Education Connection was offered from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. for free, and the Maple Stars After School program was from 2 to 6 p.m. for $55 a week for Glendale residents and $70 a week for non-residents. The total budget of this program was $541,000, with $250,000 from Measure S funds and $291,000 being reallocated from CSP's general funds, which were previously allocated for the One Glendale Sports program, which would remain unused while GUSD was not in session. At the end of the fall session, there were a total of 1,732 duplicated participants with a 91% enrollment rate in the Education Connection program and 295 duplicated participants with 16% enrollment rate in the Maple Stars Camp program. Staff heard from several parents that they were unable to take advantage of the after-school program because of the fee. Because of this lower than expected enrollment due to the fee in the after-school program and some weeks where countywide spikes in cases kept some parents from sending their children, the total cost of the program came in lower at $318,000. Given the overall success of the program and GUSD's continued need for additional tech pods to support our community, in December 2020, Council approved $950,000 in CDBG CARES Act funding to extend the program through the spring semester, add 2 additional pods of 10 to 12 children, and provide the after-school session free of charge. Even with the opening up of classrooms with a modified schedule, these pods will continue to be needed. With the remaining $225,000 of unused Measure S funds from the fall semester, staff proposes setting this aside for a potential One Glendale after-school youth sports program. With GUSD slowly opening schools up, they have asked the city to reevaluate starting the One Glendale program, and staff will be meeting with GUSD in the coming weeks to develop a program that meets county guidelines. Once staff is able to finalize the details, CSP will provide an update describing the program and details and cost in a memo to council. In December 2020, Council also allocated $608,000 in CDBG CARES Act funding to operate the Civic Auditorium as a medical point of dispensing, or MPOD, site for the COVID-19 vaccine with LA County Public Health. At the time of the meeting, there were still a number of pending questions with LA County and whether it would be feasible to operate an MPOD at the Civic using CDBG funds. Since that meeting, the county has stopped working with cities on coordinating new sites and notified the city that we can instead partner with local hospitals and private clinics to distribute vaccines. Operation of MPODs at the Civic would not qualify for use of CDBG funds, as the site is not located in a low-income census tract and the population served at the site cannot be limited to demographics required for use of the funds. Staff is still exploring if we can coordinate vaccination sites in census tracts that would allow for the use of CDBG funds. And if we're not able to use those funds, staff will return to the City Council with recommendation on how to reallocate the MPOD funding to a new program or issue an RFP to community organizations. While details about the CDBG funding is still being sorted out, staff began working with private clinics to offer vaccinations in Glendale. The city partnered with Tri-State Clinics to offer a mobile vaccination site at the Civic on February 20th, 21st, and 22nd, and March 1st, 4th, and 5th. The clinic was operated by Tri-State Clinics with staff support from Community Services and Parks and the Glendale Fire and Police Departments. On March 2nd, CSP also worked with a company called Curative to offer vaccinations at the Adult Recreation Center through an invitation-only clinic for seniors in our nutritional meals program, and working with nonprofits in the hospitals to directly enroll seniors participating in their programs. The city will evaluate these partnerships for a long-term plan to continue to offer vaccinations in Glendale. In order to continue to provide staff support for the aforementioned vaccination sites and potentially future vaccination sites in Glendale, staff is proposing to reallocate $200,000 from the PPE program to operate these MPODs. Additional direction is requested on 2 additional items. A request had been made to utilize some of these recovery funds to make COVID-19 improvements at for the HVAC system at the Alex Theater. Based on research of other venues, this is not something staff currently is recommending, but it is something we will be keeping an eye on. And then a formal survey. In anticipation of this strategy's conclusion and the exhaustion of current funds, staff is looking ahead at the ongoing potential need of the business community. In an effort to provide data-driven information and recommendations to council, staff is recommending a formal survey be initiated utilizing funds in the Small Business Recovery Grant, so no additional funding would be needed. This survey would be developed in conversation with the Business Recovery Task Force with the goal of identifying what that next generation of assistance would look like for businesses, whether that be policy, more grants, or services from the city. This concludes my presentation, and as staff considers the motion alternatives, I'm available to answer questions, as is Dr. Gary Schaefer from Library Arts and Culture and Onik Bolanikian from Community Services and Parks.
Any council member has any question from staff?
Mr. Mayor,
If not, I'm sorry,
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Najarian?
thank you.
Council member
So,
Najarian.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some questions on the Measure S business grants and the low-income grants.
Yes.
With regard to the permitting the home-based businesses to receive funding. So what are your thoughts on that? My experience is that a home-based business is much differently impacted from all this COVID than an actual, let's call it, brick and mortar business. I mean, the brick and mortar folks, they've got leases, they've got rental obligations, they've got insurance, they've got utilities, they've got parking, let's say, for their employees. A home-based business, you know, it's your kitchen, or it's your office, home office, and you're doing, I don't know, tax returns, or you're doing a web design, or you're doing things like that. I don't think any of the COVID restrictions that the restaurants and some of the other commercial entities have experienced even touch their business model. Clearly, there's been a drop in business. I can assume. I mean, let's assume that. But the expenses that they have to carry are almost nil compared to the brick and mortars. So I would rather, if it was up to me, I would rather continue and expand the opportunity for this grant to the brick and mortars, because I think they're the ones who are, you know, their expenses haven't necessarily dropped, and they're not as flexible and can pivot as quickly as a home-based business. So is there an opportunity for that, or are you saying that we've just maxed out on the brick and mortar at this point?
Excuse me, before they answer, I want to say, how about, do we consider if there was a store and they lost and now they operate from home? Is there any difference between that with the business that from day one they were operating from home? Do we want to differentiate among them that they lost and now they moved to like inside their house to continue?
That, Mr. Mayor, I think that's exactly the point. And if the council so desired, you could say a home-based business that had a brick and mortar. What we're seeing is some of them have just closed shop and they've moved to their house, let's say, for whatever reason. And it might be a service provider that can very easily do it, or it might be a retail merchant that is now shifting to online sales. It could be fitness, where they're using their home now as their office to arrange for classes, even in our parks. It's a good point that you make, Mr. Najarian. Many of those home-based businesses really have been able to continue doing business the same way they always have. And they haven't been very affected. This was really aimed at those brick and mortar that are now forced for circumstance to go back to their home and try and kickstart their business.
And if I may add to
Yes.
Mr. Lanzafame's comments, 20% of the applicants were denied because they were not in a commercial zone. So there has been a need amongst the business community by way of their applications, or at least they vocalize that they have that need.
So it's not that they don't have a need. I mean, I agree. I think every business universally has experienced a cutback, except maybe grocers and all that. That's another
Issue.
That's another discussion. But in terms of who needs it the most, and if there are applicants in that they need it the most pool, I'd really like to get out and let those businesses get another tickler, a phone call, some education that there are funds available. You know, hang on, we can help you, rather than say, okay, well, those that have applied, and let's lower the bar a little bit to a different type of business model. That's my only point. This isn't going to save someone. It's not going to break someone. But it's, I guess it's just the policy discussion.
Excuse me, Mr. Lanzafim apparently wants to answer, and then we go to Ms. Devine. Mr. Lanzafim.
I was just going to say, if that is council's desire, we would still recommend, though, that they not be required to be a brick and mortar, not be required to be in a commercial zone. There are some brick and mortar enterprises that are not in a commercial zone. But we understand the distinction. You want those that are operating, paying a lease in that zone.
Right. Non-home.
Council.
I mean, I'm in my house. You could say this is brick and mortar too, and stucco. No BRB on me. But
We would require
a business office type or location that's just not in a recognized commercial zone.
Right, that's got a lease or a mortgage.
I mean, that would seem to be a little more equitable to me. Thank you.
Councilmember Devine.
Yeah, well, that was funny. That was exactly what I was going to say, that, if this 20% that you're saying that were turned down are commercial, but not in the commercial zone, then I don't see any problem with that. But I agree with Councilmember Najarian that if they're working from home, I don't see them having the need that a brick and mortar that isn't in the zone would have. So I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
Is there any
Mr.
other
Mayor?
comments? Otherwise, I want to go.
Yes, Mr.
Do we
Mayor?
have any callers? Do we have any
I
callers?
want to follow up on that
Mayor,
point,
we do
though.
not have any callers.
Okay, we don't have any callers. Mr. Brotman, Councilmember
Yeah,
Brotman.
I just want to continue with this point, because it makes sense Councilmember Najarian, it makes sense what you're saying. The problem is like parsing all this because there's some brick and mortars. I'm thinking of like accountancies or law firms or realtors or, they're brick and mortars that have not, whose businesses kind of continued just fine through COVID. And then there's some that have been really devastated. Home businesses, you probably also have a mix. You have some, like you said, that are perfectly fine. They've been doing stuff online, no hiccup. Others that have been hit. And it's hard for us to kind of, parse who's who. And that's where it gets back to this hardship, So, I mean, personally, I would say if we are going to rely on self-certification, if that's what we've already decided, then we kind of just have to rely on that. That people are, indicating that they have had at least a 25% loss in their income. If that's the case, I think we should, make them eligible whether they're at home or not. Personally, because I just think you could find examples of brick and mortars that are perfectly fine. You could find examples at home businesses that are really hurting. I just think it's like really hard for us to start making those distinctions at a macro level. So that would be my thing would just be, we're making them certify that they've taken this loss, and that's our approach.
Thank you.
That's just my 2 cents on it.
Thank you. Mr. Kasakian, Council Member Kasakian, I don't see him, but do you
No,
want to?
I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm
Do you
just
have any
listening to my
comments or
colleagues.
any comments?
Personally, I think that, the recommendations of staff are noted. I believe that, they have been working closely or as closely as they possibly can under these conditions to make sure that we're providing assistance. And I want to extend to them our trust in their ability to distribute these funds as quickly as possible to those businesses that need it. I do hear my colleagues, and there's good points made on both sides. Ultimately, I think if someone is demonstrating a hardship and we've asked them to do that, and I will say that, self-certifying or whatever the case may be, I do want them to show in some form that they have experienced hardship during COVID, because that's who these limited funds are intended for. Then that should suffice regardless of how the business operates, where they are. And we can't assume to understand every business's operation and how it's been impacted by COVID. A lot of people have had to switch their ways of doing business because of family care issues, because of their schools being closed and having children they have to care for, or whatever the case may be. I don't want to be the one making the overarching determination and wagging my finger at anyone. What I want staff to do is to talk to the applicants, have them ascertain whether they've experienced a loss, and then let's not really kid ourselves. As much as we're trying to provide assistance, and we've done incredible work and been at the forefront of this before really anyone else was by even putting our own money up to provide assistance, it's really like spitting on a fire, given the duration of this crisis, how much loss people have experienced, and what the amounts are that they're receiving in terms of assistance from the city. So with that, I support staff's recommendations.
I just want to add, of course, definitely I want to see those who lost their business. Let's say they have rented before an apartment or business location, whether it's store or otherwise. If they lost it during this COVID-19, I definitely want to see that they will receive the help. I mean, those who have been in a storefront or wherever, and they lost it now, they moved to their house or any residential area, I think they're entitled to get the money. They get the help because they tried and it was impossible to continue. Why they had to stay and incur more losses or more, borrow money from here and there. The recommendation which is in here, I think I'm in favor of what has been recommended here. But definitely, if we go that route, I want to make sure those who had place of business, regardless was in residential or non-residential area, they were paying rent or they suffered. those to be helped. That's my idea. Okay, now, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Brotman.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah, I had a few other things. As far as the getting back to the arts, so we have that 30 to 40,000 remaining. In even cutting back from 200 to 100,000, we still, I guess, have between 30 and 40,000 remaining. So back to Councilmember Devine's original point, I'm okay with us considering doing second grants to recipients that have received a grant already within that $30,000 to $40,000, subject to staff's recommendation. If staff thinks that there's still a need, and maybe they can reach out first and inquire, and if there's still a need, I think that I would be okay with opening it up again. Given that we've got a limited pool of these arts institutions and we still have that, we still have between 30 and 40, you're saying, left, which is still a substantial amount. So I'd support that. Just want to say that. One thing on the MPODs, or not on the MPODs, the mobile clinic. I know we did this at the Adult Recreation Center for seniors. Have we considered doing anything specifically with GUSD for teachers? Because I think we all want the teachers to make sure that we're getting to them as quickly as possible. Mr. Bulanikian, have we done anything there, or are we talking about doing anything there?
Yes, Mayor Agajanian, members of the council, Councilmember Brotman. This past week and last week, we had 4 clinic dates that were available for GUSD teachers. We work with Glenville Unified Administration, sent them the links, the vaccination links, and they signed up quite a few teachers.
Oh,
We
good.
also had a day and a half of clinics for GCC instructors. Both, I believe it was on last Friday, we had slots available at the Civic Auditorium and at Dignity Health Clinic Memorial. So
Okay, and are they telling us they need more? Does GUSD need more, or are the teachers, that want to get vaccinated getting vaccinated?
the teachers that want to get vaccinated are getting vaccinated. So they're pretty much set.
That's great.
Both GUSD and GCC are pretty much set in terms of vaccination.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Up to us asking for additional time slots, we'll be more than happy to give them the link.
Excuse me, do
Okay,
you
and then just
know,
the last thing I want to say is, I support all of staff's recommendations, and I want to just, thank staff. And I don't know how many people have been involved in this, but this is a lot. And I know this is just the business recovery. There's also, other work that we've done with renters. So I want to commend staff for running all these programs in very short order. And yeah, I agree with Councilmember Kasaki. And what is it spitting to put out a fire? But still, a lot of work has been done, and I'm sure it's had some good impact. So thank you for that.
thank you. Mr. Bolanikian, I have a question for you. Do you know what percentage of the teachers have been vaccinated?
Mayor Agajani, members of the council, those numbers I do not have. We can reach out to the district and GCC and ask. Not sure if they can provide that information to us, but we can go ahead and ask them and get back to
Okay.
the council.
Mr. Golanian has an answer.
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that information, due to privacy concerns, that information is not available to the public.
I mean, percentage is not something to hide. We are not saying who is vaccinated, who is not vaccinated. It's just percentage of those who are vaccinated. The parents, they know those teachers are not going to cause problem themselves for the kids.
Right, so to come up with that percentage, actually, that the data is not available as to how many teachers and educators have been vaccinated.
I don't think this is right, but however, I accept your answer. Thank you. Okay, now, anybody wants to move this item?
I'll move the item.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Is there-
Staff, everything is clear what we have done?
I just want to make sure on the, is there a change, though, to the one motion regarding the parameters on home-based businesses?
I
Or
think
we're okay with the staff recommendation?
Okay, we
I'm
go with
leaving
this.
the item as is.
Okay.
I don't really think we should be changing them, in my opinion. So my motion would be just to take the staff's recommendation as is. With the only proviso being, if you could come back to us on the arts piece and let us know whether you believe that we should relook at that and maybe open up for additional grants. But we don't probably have to decide that right now.
Mr. Sakian, is
Mayor
there?
Agajanian,
Yes, Mr. Shafe.
we'll be happy to take a look at that and come back to council with that.
Mr. Sakian, are you still seconding what you did? You
Yes,
second.
yes, I am.
Roll
second
call,
that.
please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Brotman,
Yes.
Devine,
Yes.
Kasakian,
Yes.
Najarian.
I did want some further clarification from Mr. Lanzafame.
Okay. You want to ask now?
That ship has sailed, though.
Is it possible not to ask?
Well, you're in the middle of the vote, you'd have to, you know.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna abstain because I'm not clear on what the policy directing staff to do is.
And Mayor Agajanian.
Yes. All right.
Since the
Okay.
vote
What-
has already occurred, Phil, let me just understand this. It's that you're removing the commercial zoning location requirement for eligibility for those grants.
That's correct, but we're also allowing home-based businesses.
You're also allowing home-based, okay.
Right, that was the recommendation which was moved. That's the direction we're taking.
Okay. Okay, what's next, Mr. Ajamian?
Adjournment.
I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a
Second.
second? With that said,
Second.
the meeting is adjourned at 2:56 p.m. Thank you.
Here.
Mayor Agajanian.
Present. Please read